Okay. So Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe's The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. It's a pretty interesting kind of flair of a novel. It had a lot going on, and it seemed almost to be, if you didn't tell me, or some, at least if you didn't tell, the if you told, rather, the first lay person on the side of the road, just like out of a crowd by random, arbitrarily, if you told them this was fiction, they probably would believe you, because I probably would too, because it's some of the stuff that happens in with the merry pranksters and all, all the kind of beat poet kind of adjacent people of that scene in the counterculture of the 1960s was so like out of this, like completely out, like beyond reality. And so a lot of that had to do with the psychedelic kind of undercurrent pushing this whole thing. So a little bit about Tom Wolfe. He was born, I want to say, 1930, um, and he lived a pretty long life. He lived a pretty scope, whole pretty wide scope, and saw a lot in his lifetime. He only died, I want to say, 6 or 7 years ago in 2018, and he was associated a lot with the new journalism movement, and that was Hunter S. Thompson and Tom Wolfe were at the center, the forefront of that kind of that movement, and um, Thompson actually famously coined the term gonzo journalism, but I'm not sure how much of that was Tom Wolfe's kind of stuff. He wrote, the only other thing I read by him was, I want to say last year or so, I read Mau Mau and the Radical Chick and the Mau Mau. It was this pretty interesting journal about this uh, this kid, him recounting his interactions with this Black Panther Party, and there's quite a few pretty famous people in the 60s that like part of the culture and counterculture movement that were part of the kind of radical left and the kind of pretty close to what the Black Panthers were doing, but I'm rusty on exactly what happened. I do know that there was, I want to say, the famous Leonard, I think it was a composer, Leonard Bernstein, was in one of these places. Oh, it just occurred to me that my color was popped. I was not trying to do that for comedic effect, I swear. Um, but anyway, so yeah, so I just finished not too long ago, a few days ago, the electric Kool-Aid acid test, and yeah, it was. I had it on my list for a little while because I heard it was like one of the main kind of new journalism kind of um, things, I guess. And I think what the he was during, I want to say, 60. So it came out 68, right? And Ken Kesey was the forefront of this as well, and he um, wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which came in, which was at the time was pretty got him pretty well known and surged in kind of popularity because he was kind of a he wrote it in 62, I want to say, and it was adapted into a film, a pretty really award winning film by Milos Forman, and in what is that, like over a decade later, I want to say like 1974 or five, I think, and yeah, it was a one of my favorite movies, I gotta say, and even if it is one of those movies that seems like one of those things where it's like 10, you know 20 or 100 movies to watch before you die, I think that's definitely on that list for a reason, along with Being There by Jerzy Kosinski. That's like another one of those Hal Ashby directed. But yeah, yeah, Ken Kesey is a kind of force of nature in this one. He's like one of the main heavy hitters, I guess you could say. Him and his merry pranksters is what he calls them. They're like a group of ragtag people, um, all kinds of walks of life, hippies, and one of them is called, like, Doris, jokingly called Doris DeLay, I think, because she kind of bears a resemblance to the actress. And another, there's Neil Cassidy, and that name because I was just kind of on the know about, I haven't read his stuff yet, his kind of personal kind of contributions to beat poetry, but I do know that ever since I read On the Road when I was 22 or 23, that was my first foray into kind of beat stuff, um, beatnik related stuff with like the jazz kind of influenced. But yeah, Neil Cassidy was the prototype kind of main influence for Dean Moriarty, and he was this force of nature himself, and he was like he's always going around like this very character, very eccentric character rather, very flamboyant, very not so much one of those kind of studied, kind of reclusive people. I know Jack Kerouac had kind of a propensity towards mere periods where he would have to go off the road, and he would go into this, which is what Darwin Bombs kind of entails, because he would go off and kind of isolate. But Neil Cassidy seemed to be kind of always kind of like going, amongst things. And he was driving the bus here. I can't remember the name of the bus that they called, but it was this school bus that they got, and they repurposed this bus to go across the country and kind of pick up all walks of life, like I said, and they'd go past turnpikes, and they some of what was going on was so. I heard throughout the book that there were some of them, like the police would like not pull them over because they were like they kind of knew complicitly or tacitly, just because their body language is that they were all on acid and they didn't want to cause it a scene, so they would just kind of quietly kind of let them go, not even with a warning, I don't think. But yeah, there's plenty of instances of kind of a lot of. I guess there's a lot going on. There's kind of repetitions, and Tom Wolfe kind of encapsulates that very manic, very sincere, but very. It can get a little bit tiring. It got a little bit tiring of just kind of the repetition of just that beat poetry kind of flair of just kind of in the day glow kind of magazines, and then all the day glow crazies come up. Like it's not like I dislike repetition. I think it might fit for certain atmospheres and certain novels and stuff like that. But I think for something that's like a good 300, 400 pages, I want to say, it was and a good 12-hour read, at least. It gets a little bit tiresome for me. But that's not to say that I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was quite very eye opening. Certain things that just gave me a little bit that much more of a detailed kind of on the ground kind of exact kind of like reflection of like what was going on. Tom Wolfe really this new journalism was it was he differed from Hunter S. Thompson in the say I want to say this is my take. Not necessarily saying this is factually true, but I think he didn't really immerse himself as much as Thompson did in the gritty kind of psychedelic aspect of these. If you just read anything by Hunter S. Thompson, like you'll instantly know. And I don't think I've just read. I think it was just the. I heard some excerpts from the Hell's Angels, but I also mostly it was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and that was so. You get the sense that even without the kind of the lens or through the lens of kind of fictional character, in the same way that Sal Paradise is a stand-in for Jack Kerouac in for On the Road, but you get the sense that Hunter S. Thompson definitely was he was one of those people that was probably a little bit more well known for his personality, his very combative, very yet at the same time inquisitive, but also very very much drug addled, like a lot of issues he had with depression, and that kind of led to his kind of an early death at the age of 60s, in his early 60s, I want to say, so by suicide, and it was probably because of the fact that he was on so many drugs. But with Tom Wolfe, I get the sense that he was pretty straight-laced. He didn't really involve himself in that lifestyle. He kind of watched it. He was like, in fact, I think various interviews, I think the 60-minute interview, I can't remember if it was Dan Rather but he was probably quoting somebody else that said that he had that Tom Wolfe has a fly on the wall kind of observation, and if you see him too, he's famous for his like kind of southern, not much. I don't know if he has so much had. I can't really remember if he had much of an accent retained after all these years. He probably kind of lost it. Louisiana, I believe he's from. But Tom Wolfe had a unique personality in the sense that he retained this kind of flamboyant white kind of panache suit, of kind of a Southern gentleman, and that if you look at any image of him, like probably post 1960 something, you're probably gonna see that him in that suit. So that's kind of an interesting kind of fact about him. But I think, yeah, he was pretty conservative about a lot of stuff. He didn't he was married to the same woman. He never had any issues with, as far as like marital trouble. He didn't. I think he was really much of a, he tried. I think he said that in the book, that he said that he tried marijuana, and out of, and maybe some psychedelics, but I don't think it really stuck with him. Nothing really in this whole like over, because with the whole like thing with like the hyper individuation, or in the intersubjectivity, I think they called it, and they're trying to meet with Ken Leary, or sorry, Timothy Leary. I'm sorry, mixing up the names. Obviously, Tim O'Leary was a very impactful psychedelic, like and like actual, not botanist. I think Terence McKenna was the kind of ethnobotanist guy that was kind of also like a student of Leary, who also died tragically young as well, at the cusp of the 20th century. But Tim O'Leary was the one of I'm not sure when he passed away, but he had a, the only other kind of author I really read was Dr. Richard Straussman, and with the psychedelic handbook, because I was like kind of had a kind of foray, or kind of a slight interest for a phase where I kind of read a little bit here and there about psychedelics and stuff, just to kind of educate myself. And even through kind of a glass, or darkly, I guess, or through even through the lens of curiosity, it gets kind of a little bit like, you see these characters that Tom Wolfe is mentioning, and they kind of, sorry, they kind of rub off on you or him, or there's kind of a extreme kind of like I'm not sure. There's a lot happening. There's like a lot of motion. People are like going left and right. They're going to California. We're going to go to California, and they're going to try to win over all these different people. They're going to try to get the Grateful Dead. I think Jerry Garcia too. And I never got the Grateful Dead. I tried listening to them. I just really don't. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if it's like, if I grew up in the 90s, I would have kind of had that recrudescence of 60s music, and that might have rubbed off on me in a way where but maybe it's just like I just didn't listen to them enough, or I don't get them. I just don't. I don't know. Because I listened to them. I definitely listened to some of their stuff. I try to listen through the whole album, I think, and it just did not. I don't know. It just nothing. It was just like there's. I just felt, I got the sense that they were just like overrated, and that the whole aspect of the culture and the cultural kind of aspect of psychedelia was like the big thing that gave them, like, in the same way that the band Fish too, like, have so many fanatic fans, because they're so, I guess, just prevalent, just culturally. They just keep touring, and they just never stop. They're just a kind of a force of nature. They just have a good work ethic about these things, and they're not. It's not necessarily because their music is really that subversive, or even all that experimental. But maybe it's not. I could be totally wrong with Fish. I don't know. I always got the sense that they're kind of like, them and the Grateful Dead were kind of, but maybe they're just completely different. I don't know. I just never understood them. I'll leave it at that. But they were supposed to mean, because all these kind of people, the Beatles too. They were supposed to get the Beatles in a. They had the Merry Pranksters, even though they weren't necessarily pranksters. It was just kind of a jovial little fun name that they just kind of threw at the wall, and it stuck. And so they basically all came together, and the band kind of kept it was an interesting kind of thing, because it was Kesey was kind of the unofficial leader, but he also wanted to stress that he was not like, I'm not like the end all be all of this group. Don't look at me like in a charismatic kind of creepy kind of way. He was trying to stress that, so I'll give them credit for that. But and I'm also kind of a budding kind of fan of his. I did really enjoy One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and this other novel he was writing at the time when this whole thing was taking place. Sometimes a Great Notion, but it's quite a big book, I think, from what I've heard. But I'm not sure if I'm quite ready to take that one on yet. I've got to probably read some other stuff first. But yeah, so they're all kind of gallivanting around and looking for different ways to kind of assuage people into, and even trick, kind of using kind of even some sense of subterfuge, just to kind of get people to kind of um, to kind of see what they're doing, because they're like, this is kind of a radical kind of message of, like this, um, there's a lot of, with this idea of like the intersubjectivity, and like this idea of like the ego death is a pretty big thing that they do take seriously, and it's not, but they want to kind of they want to kind of get people to kind of be convinced by them by using methods that are a little bit kind of that are trickstery, I guess. So they try to get the Beatles, and the Beatles are trying to, they're touring around, and then they were very inspired by the movie that they had, not the, I think it was the Magical Mystery Tour Bus. I kept wanting to say the Yellow Submarine, which I did grow up with my periphery on, the Yellow Submarine, like we all live. But that was more of a kids movie. I think the big, what was it called? The school bus that they went around England all throughout. They circumnavigated all of the country in that same school bus, on the tour, pretty much kind of a tour bus kind of thing. That was enough to kind of accommodate them, and then they were all high on LSD and just doing creative, being as creative as nothing, songwriting, and doing their thing, and writing lyrics, and yeah. So that's what the Merry Pranksters, they got that. I pretty much that kind of was inspired them to start their own thing. So that's why they kind of want to kind of butt head, to kind of get, even if, for a little bit, just like a night, to kind of pick their brains of the Beatles. So, just kind of see what, I guarantee that's probably John Lennon slash idea, maybe a Paul McCartney thing, I'm not sure. But I think, I'm not sure who it was who introduced them to transcendental meditation. But I think it might have been George Harrison. But although I think George Harrison kind of had the most long-standing kind of affiliation with that, so yeah. But anyway, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on. But a lot of it kind of, some of it at least, kind of fell on, didn't really go through. It kind of went in one ear out the other, because I didn't grow up in that 60s. I didn't grow up. All the stuff I have to do is kind of a educating kind of guess of like what happened in the 60s. But like I do, but I think now that we're in this age, it's just interesting that, or maybe a little bit sad, I guess, the fact that there's not really a lot going on like what happened in the 60s, that kind of massive kind of cultural shift. And it seems that I just kind of wish, on just a personal level, that people would get together again and like kind of do that, but like in a less kind of maybe chaotic way, because it seems like the only other thing that's really happening that's like, as far as like, is activism or political activism, and that easily can turn into an ugly, like over the top, like people at each other's throats, like kind of thing, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm just wondering like what happened to the the hippie days. Like it's as kind of maybe a little bit shallow, or not shallow, but maybe as an argument from emotion. Maybe it just seems like this idea of like it's like activism, but like kind of pacifism, but it's also kind of mixed with a kind of Eastern kind of thing. And that's another thing in the book I almost forgot to mention, was Kesey's interest in Hermann Hesse and Dostoevsky, and a little bit of Nietzsche, all kind of wound up together. And that they kept mentioning that one book by Hermann Hesse that I actually read, and I actually recognized it. It was The Journey to the East, and that was following this guy that's it's just going on a journey to the East, as it says in the title, but it's also a spiritual tale of just someone who kind of has a lot of certain baggage holding on to, that they're trying to let go, and the main character is pretty much going toward kind of the Occidental regions where Eastern mysticism abounds, and he's trying to find, and then he ends up finding so many of his, like, all the people pulling the strings at the end of him that kind of cajoled him into this in the first place. It's been like a few years since I read it, but it's a really short read too. It's like an hour or two at the most, kind of long. But near the end of it, he finds out, spoiler alert, that those who were pulling the strings were actually his childhood friend, like one of his childhood friends. And then there was also like these old kind of ancient figures, and like I don't know if it was Plotinus or some he was like a mix of like old figures of like throughout history that were like like it might have been like a Tolstoy and like all these different kind of like pretty like giants of literature or poetry, Rumi, that kind of scope. Um, and yeah, they were all kind of like trying to like um, cook up or try to instill um, in this person to kind of like a spiritual kind of ecstasy. So I'm really sorry that my whole entire time I'm just like mumbling through this. I'm so damn tired, man. It's like and I'm also it's late too, so I'm just kind of mumbling through this, and I'm basically saying the same stuff that basically everybody says all the time, and I don't really have a lot of confidence in the fact that I'm repeating people that I don't really have much new anything much to say new, and I also want to do a million other things like during these days too, and that's why when I do these things, it's not like I'm putting all into these things because it's like it's always a hit or miss type of thing, and it's gonna be unloading, but whatever. I mean, it's like it's when I put something out there and it's like there's zero, and there's like the engagement is like like a tiny little crowd of like one or two people. It's good enough. It's not even like I'm looking for that. But when I think about the amount of brain work or like the amount of research I'm gonna put into something, I don't want to like. No offense. I just like I'm trying to be a Renaissance guy. When I say Renaissance, I don't necessarily mean that the profound that what I'm doing is going to be that like profoundly in like synced in the synthesis of all these different things that I'm doing like um, music and stuff like that. Where on one hand I've been slacking in the production of music, whereas for me to set up the piano and do like a little ditty, that's the easiest thing in the world. I can do that and like record it and put it out there because I've gone so decent enough at piano or like that I have this storage or framework of stuff that I know that I can kind of rely on in the moment that will like that I've learned in the combined stuff that I've learned these 15 basically like 14 years or whatever that I've learned piano and my guitar or whatever else but when it comes to the actual production of stuff like me sitting down and I've also got a new computer too. That's what I've another thing that's why I'm probably tired is not because I just because I worked out, probably because of that too. But because I'm trying to spread myself too thin. I'm trying to do so many things. I know that it's not going to help anybody. It's not helping in my case especially. And you guys certainly aren't benefiting from this, but at the same time, like this whole like a new computer, which is a Dell, ended up only being 1 terabyte. So now I have to get several different outsourced to external hard drives to so I can source out all these different things that I have because there's like that's not nearly enough for me to actually reinstall stuff like FL Studio or even like the basic stuff like Microsoft 365. But who knows? Maybe I'll get like a 1 terabyte hard drive, just like bite the bullet and get the money or however much those cost and the money that I do have saved up that I thought it's probably not going to be. But then again, another part of me thinks that I might be teaching English overseas. And another part of me thinks that I might not. And then another part of me thinks that, oh, well, maybe I'll tour, like do a weird unofficial tour across the United States, and just kind of in the spirit of the electric Kool-Aid acid test, and kind of maybe that will fulminate something or try to get something going. But like at the same time, there's so little there's so much time, but there's so little time, if that makes sense. I don't know. There's time enough to reflect and to write, but that's also pretty much all I've done is write and reflect and do music in this place, in this one place. I've had little tastes of Europe. I've like sculpted out little I've little times in my schedule where I went out and did stuff like that. I went to Sweden for 2 weeks. I went to France and surrounding like a dozen different countries, but for a month. Yet the theme is consistent. Is that I'm just going back to home because it's the place where I've moved. And there's maybe the personal reasons I can go through is that I don't have all the time in the world. I have maybe my maybe my disposition, or there's certain little quirks and stuff that I have that might be where it might be best for me to stay home and not like go and bog other people down by trying to randomly like going up. I don't know. Or anyway, so that's enough kind of my, I don't know, soapbox, I guess, for now. But yeah, the electric Kool-Aid acid test. I recommend it. It is a little bit into kind of a lot of weird stuff going on, and it might take a. It's kind of one of those you'd have to have been there to actually understood any of what Tom Wolfe is talking about, or, um, but I still recommend it. Just because I try to recommend everything that I do, on in a genuine level, not aside from the stuff that if I'm reviewing it. A short answer is yes. I recommend the stuff that I do because it's just even if I dislike most of it, or even if I dislike 9 out of 10 stuff that I read, I still like everybody can make up their own mind, and maybe new journalism might not be my thing. I'm not like a huge fan of it, but I don't know. It could differ from person to person. So yeah, that's all I have for today, and thanks for watching. If you've made it this far in, but you can also probably just skip to parts. I'll probably put a timestamp if you guys want to go skip a part of the pause where skip past the part where I'm just kind of rambling and not really doing anything but repeating myself of the 50th time about life difficulties and all that stuff. But I'll try to make a different video for that. But yeah, never say never. But yeah, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.